Thursday, August 31st, 2023, AGNDD Intellireport topic. Uyghur genocide. Please pardon any visual and informational inaccuracies in this entirely AI-generated Wikipedia-sourced video article.
The Uyghurs, a Turkic ethnic group in Xinjiang, China, have been seeking greater autonomy in a region marked by ethnic conflict and sporadic violence. Uyghurs are a Turkic ethnic group in Xinjiang, China, distinct from the Han Chinese majority. They are predominantly Muslim and have a significant cultural and linguistic identity. The Uyghur language is spoken by around 10 million people and is also used by other minority groups in the region. The region of Xinjiang is a source of ethnic conflict between the Uyghurs and the predominantly Han Chinese government. Uyghurs have been seeking greater autonomy, leading to resistance and sporadic violence. Scholars Anna Hayes and Michael Clark describe Xinjiang as undergoing a transition as the Chinese government tries to integrate it into the larger Chinese state. Xinjiang, a region in China, has a complex history. It was under the control of various Chinese dynasties, including the Qing dynasty, which expanded westward in the 1700s. Xinjiang briefly gained independence during the Dungan Revolt, but later came under Chinese rule again. The Uyghur population played a role in the Dzungar genocide and were granted permission by the Qing emperor to resettle in the former Dzungaria territories. During the warlord era in the Republic of China, the region was semi-autonomous and controlled by various factions. The Kumal Khanate, the Ma clique, and later warlord Jin Shuran had control over different parts. In 1933, the First East Turkestan Republic broke away in the Kumal Rebellion but was conquered the next year by warlord Sheng Shikai with Soviet aid. The ILI Rebellion in 1944 led to the establishment of the Second East Turkestan Republic, which relied on the Soviet Union until it was absorbed into the People's Republic of China in 1949. From the 1950s to the 1970s, the Chinese government encouraged the migration of Han Chinese to Xinjiang and implemented policies to suppress Uyghur cultural identity and religion. Uyghur independence organizations emerged with support from the Soviet Union, leading to conflicts with the Han Chinese. In the 1980s, the Chinese government attempted cultural liberalization but later shifted to a policy of minority assimilation. Economic development efforts in Xinjiang led to ethnic tension and uprisings, with violent incidents occurring in 1990, 1997, and 2009. Uyghur separatists carried out terrorist attacks from 2009 to 2016. Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan criticized China's treatment of the Uyghur community, straining China-Turkey relations. In the lead-up to the 2008 Beijing Olympics, the Chinese state focused on stability maintenance, leading to increased repression. After the Urumqi riots in 2009, the party called for a more monocultural society and implemented policies to achieve this. Following an attack in Yunnan province, Xi Jinping emphasized the need to combat terrorism harshly. In 2014, the Strike Hard campaign against violent terrorism was launched in Xinjiang, leading to tensions between the Han Chinese and Uyghur populations. Chen Quanguo was appointed to oversee the campaign and implemented strict measures, dividing society into categories and increasing police presence. In 2017, following a meeting with Xi Jinping, Chen Quanguo organized a rally in Urumqi. During the rally, he announced a strong offensive against terrorists and issued orders for mass arrests. Various bans and regulations were put into effect, which included limitations on beards, veils, media consumption, and family planning. Monitoring systems based on race were obtained to identify Uyghurs, and stricter border controls were implemented. Foreign journalists experienced growing restrictions when reporting on Xinjiang. Alleged re-education efforts began in 2014 and expanded in 2017, leading to the construction of internment camps. The use of vocational training centers seems to have ceased in 2019. The Chinese government has engaged in a propaganda campaign to defend its actions in Xinjiang, including the internment camps. Initially denying their existence, China later portrayed the camps as humane and denied human rights abuses. Chinese authorities attacked the credibility of Uyghur women who made abuse allegations by disclosing confidential medical data and personal information. The government also targeted international journalists critical of its actions. China has used social media platforms like Facebook, Douyin, and Twitter to spread propaganda and incite doubt about human rights violations. Propaganda videos and a musical have been released to portray Xinjiang as harmonious and peaceful. China has been using the global war on terror to justify its repressive policies in Xinjiang, framing ethnic unrest as acts of Islamist terrorism. Scholars argue that this is a way for China to legitimize its actions and suppress Uyghur nationalism. The Chinese government has been accused of misusing the concept of counterterrorism to suppress culture and violate human rights. In 2021, former officials in Xinjiang were sentenced on terrorism and extremism charges, further highlighting China's approach to the issue. Mosques, Muslim shrines, and cemeteries in Xinjiang have been systematically destroyed, with an estimated 16,000 mosques damaged or destroyed. The Chinese government has prohibited minors from participating in religious activities, and over one-third of mosques and religious sites in China have suffered significant damage. Uyghur Muslims believe that the destruction of these sites is part of the ongoing repression against them. While some limited easing of religious restrictions has been observed, most Uyghurs remain fearful and have not returned to the mosques. Hui Muslims have been given more leeway than Uyghur Muslims. In 2011, schools in Xinjiang implemented a policy of bilingual education, with the primary medium of instruction being Standard Chinese. However, few Han children are taught to speak Uyghur, and Uyghur students are increasingly being sent to residential schools far from their communities where they cannot speak Uyghur. Reports from a teacher who fled China describe the harsh conditions and forced indoctrination in internment camps. In 2021, Uyghur language textbooks were outlawed and their authors and editors were sentenced on separatism charges. The Chinese government claims the textbooks promoted violence and extremism. In 2019, the Uyghur Human Rights Project recorded the incarceration, detainment, or vanishing of 386 Uyghur intellectuals since early 2017. Notable instances comprise economist Ilham Tohti, who was handed a life sentence in 2014, and anthropologist Rahile Dawood, who went missing. Uyghur Imam Abduhaber Ahmet was imprisoned for sending his son to an unauthorized religious institution. Despite previously receiving accolades from China, Ahmet was given a sentence of more than 5 years in 2018. Amnesty International condemned these actions as unjust and reprehensible. In September 2019, Agence France Presse, AFP, discovered destroyed cemeteries in Xinjiang, China, with exposed bones remaining in some. Satellite images revealed that the destruction had been ongoing for over a decade. CNN also reported that over 100 graveyards, primarily Uyghur ones, had been destroyed in Xinjiang. The Chinese government claimed that the destruction was due to lack of maintenance and that the dead were reinterred in new cemeteries. Critics argue that this is part of China's campaign to erase Uyghur identity and disconnect them from their history. According to gender studies expert Leda Hong-Fincher, the Chinese government is offering incentives to Uyghur couples to have fewer children and for Uyghur women to marry non-Uyghurs. This is seen as an attempt to erase Uyghur culture and identity. The government is encouraging intermarriage between Uyghurs and Han Chinese, providing subsidies, cash rewards, preferential treatment, and free education. Anthropologist Darren Byler suggests that this is part of a larger effort to assimilate Uyghurs and diminish ethnic differences. Traditional Uyghur marriage rights are also being restricted in some areas. Chinese authorities have discouraged the wearing of Islamic attire, such as headscarves and veils. In 2014, a protest erupted in Alakaga when 25 women and schoolgirls were detained for wearing headscarves, resulting in 2 deaths and 5 injuries. The Washington Post team was also detained and deported from the region. Leaked documents from Xinjiang internment camps reveal that some detainees have been held for wearing traditional clothing. In 2015, a list of banned names for children was introduced in Hotan, China, which included names with religious connotations such as Islam and Quran. The ban was later extended to the entire Xinjiang region. In 2017, legislation was passed making it illegal to give children names that were considered to exaggerate religious fervor, including the name Muhammad. Since 2016, the Chinese government has been using internment camps to detain ethnic minorities in Xinjiang. The estimated number of detainees is around 1 million to 1.8 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities. The camps are known for coercive labor, mass arrests, interrogations, beatings, and reports of mass deaths. The Chinese government has also been accused of violating the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide with its policies. A former Chinese police detective and Uyghur detainees have revealed details of systematic torture of Uyghurs in detention camps in Xinjiang. The detective, now exiled in Europe, disclosed his participation in the acts and the fear of arrest if he dissented. Uyghur mother Mirigal Tursun described being drugged, interrogated without sleep, subjected to medical examinations, and receiving electric shocks. Another detainee, Kairat Samarkand, spoke of being forced to wear heavy metal suits. Waterboarding has also been reported as a form of torture used in the camps. Reports of forced sterilization in Xinjiang have emerged since 2019. Uyghur woman Zumrat Duat claims she was forcibly sterilized while in a camp, but the Xinjiang regional government denies this. In 2020, the Associated Press interviewed former detainees who said they were forced to take birth control pills or injected with fluids, possibly Depo-Provera. Exiled Uyghur Dr. Guljean reported that forced sterilization of Uyghurs has been ongoing since the 1980s, with a sharp increase since 2014. She presented intrauterine devices as evidence of forced infertility. Former detainee Kairat Samarkand described the routine in the Chinese detention camps where inmates were forced to sing songs praising Xi Jinping and memorize a list of 126 lies about religion. Leaked documents advised officials to tell children that their missing parents were not criminals but had unhealthy thoughts that needed to be eradicated. Uyghur children are often sent to state-run orphanages and forced to forget their ethnic roots. Gulbahar Haidiwaji was coerced into denouncing her family after her daughter participated in a protest. The Xinjiang region in China has been referred to as a cotton gulag due to the presence of forced labor in the cotton supply chain. Uyghur individuals, including children, have been forced into labor camps where they are made to engage in strenuous work or face consequences. According to BuzzFeed News, it is highly probable that forced labor is occurring in the Xinjiang internment camps, as several factory facilities have been identified within these camps. Chinese companies have been discovered to benefit from Uyghur labor, and the Chinese government has exerted pressure on foreign companies to dismiss allegations of human rights abuses. Former inmates have alleged that they were subjected to medical experimentation while in prison. Multiple women who were formerly detained in the Xinjiang internment camps have accused Chinese authorities of organized mass rape and sexual torture. The allegations include rape, gang rape, and sexual torture with electric batons and chili pepper paste. Chinese government officials deny these allegations. The BBC and other sources have reported on these accounts, highlighting the systemic nature of the abuse. In an effort to discredit the women, Chinese officials disclosed their personal medical information. The allegations of sexual abuse are part of a larger pattern of human rights abuses in the internment camps, including murder and torture. China is reportedly conducting regular pregnancy checks on minority women in Xinjiang and implementing measures to control their population growth. Researcher Adrian Zenz has found evidence of forced birth control, sterilization, and abortions being imposed on Uyghur and other minority women. Chinese government documents indicate that birth control violations are punishable by internment. The birth rates in Xinjiang have significantly declined, with an 84% drop in population growth rates in Uyghur prefectures. Chinese authorities deny allegations of genocide and forced sterilization, attributing the decrease in birth rates to family planning policies. Since 2018, over 1 million Chinese government workers have been assigned to live in the homes of Uyghur families in an effort to monitor their resistance to assimilation and religious practices. This program, called Pair Up and Become Family, involves Han Chinese men monitoring Uyghur homes and even sleeping in the same beds as Uyghur women. Uyghur activists claim that this program is a campaign of mass rape disguised as marriage. Human Rights Watch and the World Uyghur Congress have condemned the program as a deeply invasive forced assimilation practice. According to Ethan Gutman, organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience, including Uyghurs, became prevalent in China during the 1990s. While organ harvesting from Uyghurs dropped off by 1999, it continued with members of the Falun Gong religious group becoming a source of organs. Concerns about organ harvesting from Uyghurs resurfaced in the 2010s with allegations that Uyghurs were being persecuted and medically tested. Gutman believes that at least 25,000 people are being killed in Xinjiang each year for their organs, with facilities and processes in place to streamline the organ harvesting process. The Chinese government has faced allegations of imposing forced labor conditions on Uyghurs amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Videos have surfaced showcasing Uyghurs being transported to mandatory factory labor initiatives. As per a report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, approximately 80,000 Uyghurs were forcibly transferred from Xinjiang and assigned to at least 27 factories across China. Notably, major corporations such as Apple, Nike, and Amazon have been associated with these factories. Moreover, more than 570,000 Uyghurs are compelled to manually harvest cotton in Xinjiang. Overall, the total number of Uyghurs relocated to industrial workplaces under forced labor programs exceeds 600,000. China has been accused of pressuring Uyghurs living overseas to return to China by using their families as leverage. Chinese officials deny these allegations. China's surveillance system extends beyond its borders, targeting Uyghur diaspora members, journalists, and dissidents. Facebook reported cyber espionage by Chinese hackers against the Uyghur diaspora. Uyghurs in countries like the UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia have been detained and deported back to China, causing concerns among rights activists. A joint report found 1,546 cases of Uyghurs being detained and deported in 28 countries from 1997 to March 2021. Chinese authorities have been utilizing biometric technology such as facial recognition and DNA collection to monitor individuals, specifically the Uyghur Muslim minority group. They have faced allegations of developing surveillance technologies to target people. Security-related infrastructure development, including the deployment of cameras and drones, has significantly increased in Xinjiang. Chinese companies like SenseTime, CloudWalk, Yitu, Megvii, and Hikvision have developed algorithms to assist the government in tracking the Uyghurs. The United States has imposed sanctions on Chinese firms, including subsidiaries of BGI Group, for violating the human rights of Uyghur Muslims through the exploitation of their DNA. Chen Quanguo, the former Xinjiang Party secretary, implemented a program called Physicals for All, in which DNA samples, along with other biometric data, were collected from every Xinjiang resident between the ages of 12 and 65. Tumsuk, a city in Xinjiang, was designated as a key area for security work, and a forensic DNA lab overseen by the Institute of Forensic Science of China was established there. The lab used software from Thermo Fisher Scientific, but the company decided to stop sales to Xinjiang in February 2018 due to specific concerns. Residents in China's northwest region have been ordered by security officials to install GPS tracking devices in their vehicles. This move is aimed at countering the activities of Islamist extremists and separatists. The authorities claim that there is a severe threat from international terrorism, and vehicles have been used as a means of transport and weapons by terrorists. The tracking devices will allow authorities to monitor and track all vehicles in the region. China's actions have been labeled by various entities as genocide, cultural genocide, ethnocide, and/or crimes against humanity. These designations have come from special purpose tribunals, scholars, commentators, journalists, governments, politicians, and diplomats from multiple countries. Since 2008, there have been various scholars, activists, and journalists who have described the Chinese government's treatment of Uyghurs as a form of cultural genocide. This term gained more attention after the release of classified documents in 2019. However, since June 2020, there has been a shift in terminology, with more people referring to the situation in Xinjiang as a genocide, rather than just a cultural genocide. Multiple scholars, experts, and government officials have referred to the human rights abuses against Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities in Xinjiang as genocide or crimes against humanity. Cornell University anthropologist Magnus Fiskesjo argued that the evidence for genocide is already significant, while Adrian Zenz, a leading researcher on the topic, stated that recent developments satisfy the criteria for genocide. The U.S. government officially designated the crimes as genocide in January 2021, while the International Criminal Court has requested more evidence before opening an investigation. In June 2019, the China Tribunal found that crimes against humanity had been committed against China's Uyghur Muslim and Falun Gong populations. The Asia-Pacific Center for the Responsibility to Protect also concluded that atrocities in Xinjiang likely meet the requirements of crimes against humanity and possibly genocide. However, in 2021, the U.S. Office of the Legal Advisor stated that while there were crimes against humanity in Xinjiang, there was insufficient evidence to prove genocide. In July 2019, 22 countries expressed condemnation towards China's mass detention of Uyghurs and other minority groups, whereas 50 countries showed support for China's policies in Xinjiang. Then, in October 2019, 23 countries called on China to uphold human rights, while 54 countries supported China's policies. In February 2020, the United Nations demanded access to Xinjiang, and in October 2020, additional countries condemned China's human rights violations. In May 2022, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights successfully negotiated a visit to Xinjiang, during which concerns were raised regarding counterterrorism measures and the absence of judicial oversight. In 2019, the European Parliament awarded the Sakharov Prize for Freedom and Thought to Ilham Tohti, a Uyghur activist imprisoned in China. China has since prohibited EU diplomats from visiting Tohti, and the EU has called for his release. In March 2021, the EU imposed sanctions on Chinese officials and an entity for human rights abuses against Uyghurs. Negotiations for EU ambassadors to visit Xinjiang stalled due to China's denial of access to Tohti. In June 2022, the European Parliament condemned China's actions against the Uyghur community, citing evidence of crimes against humanity and genocide. A number of African countries expressed support for China's human rights record and treatment of Uyghurs in two separate letters. The first letter, signed in July 2019, praised China's human rights record and dismissed reported abuses in Xinjiang. The second letter, signed in October 2019, expressed support for China's treatment of Uyghurs. Countries such as Algeria, Egypt, Nigeria, and Somalia signed the first letter, while Angola, Burundi, Cameroon, and others signed the second letter. Human rights activists have urged the Canadian Parliament to acknowledge the abuses against Uyghurs in China as genocide and impose sanctions on responsible officials. In October 2020, the Subcommittee on International Human Rights condemned the persecution of Uyghurs and deemed it genocide. In February 2021, the Canadian House of Commons recognized China's commission of genocide against its Muslim minorities. However, the Senate voted against recognizing the treatment of Uyghurs as genocide. Canada issued a travel advisory cautioning against arbitrary detention in Xinjiang. Additionally, in 2023, the House of Commons voted to accept 10,000 Uyghur refugees. The United States has taken a strong stance against the Chinese government's treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. The U.S. State Department has criticized visits by the UN counterterrorism chief to Xinjiang, calling them highly choreographed and propagating false narratives. In response, the U.S. Congress passed the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act and proposed the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security blocked imports from entities in Xinjiang to combat forced labor. In January 2021, the U.S. Department of State officially determined that China had committed genocide and crimes against humanity against the Uyghurs. The Biden administration has also expressed concern and promised repercussions for China's human rights violations. Several Middle Eastern countries, including Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates, have shown support for China's human rights record. While Saudi Arabia and Egypt have faced accusations of deporting Uyghurs to China, they have expressed agreement with China's approach in Xinjiang. These countries value China's non-interference principle and prioritize their economic and political relations with China. The United Arab Emirates has even formally defended China's human rights records. Qatar initially supported China's policies in Xinjiang but withdrew its defense of the Xinjiang camps on August 21, 2019. This made Qatar the first Middle Eastern country to do so. In 2021, Israel made the decision to condemn China's actions in the United Nations Human Rights Council, or UNHRC. This move resulted in a sudden deterioration of relations between China and Israel. Russia, Belarus, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan have shown their support for China's policies in Xinjiang. Russia has signed two statements at the UN in July and October 2019 backing China's Xinjiang policies. NPR has reported that Kazakhstan and other neighboring countries in Central Asia, which have benefited from Chinese investment, have remained silent on the issue of Muslims in internment camps in China. Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka have expressed their support for China's policies in Xinjiang by signing a UN document. This move aligns these countries with China's stance on the issue, which has faced international criticism for alleged human rights abuses against the Uyghur Muslim minority in Xinjiang. The signing of the document indicates these countries' endorsement of China's narrative and actions in the region. In a July 2021 interview, Prime Minister Imran Khan expressed his belief in the Chinese version of events regarding abuses in Xinjiang. He argued that there was disproportionate attention on Xinjiang compared to human rights violations in other regions, like Kashmir. Several Southeast Asian countries, including Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and the Philippines, have expressed their support for China's policies. Additionally, Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia have reportedly deported Uyghur individuals at China's request. However, in 2020, a Malaysian minister stated that Malaysia would not comply with extradition requests from China if Uyghurs felt their safety would be compromised. In summary, Turkey has had a complex stance on China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims. While initially criticizing China's actions and calling it a great shame for humanity, there have been instances of denial and arrests of Uyghur protesters in Turkey. However, in a recent joint statement with 49 UN member states, Turkey condemned China's persecution of Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims in Xinjiang. In May 2021, a testimony on Xinjiang was delayed due to a DDoS attack on the .b domain. In June 2021, the Belgian Parliament's Foreign Relations Committee passed a motion condemning the abuses in Xinjiang as crimes against humanity and expressing concerns about a potential genocide. The Czech Senate unanimously passed a motion in June 2021 condemning the abuses against the Uyghurs. The motion categorized these abuses as both genocide and crimes against humanity. France has taken a strong stance against China's treatment of Uyghurs. In December 2020, France opposed the proposed investment agreement between China and the EU due to concerns about forced labor. In February 2021, the French foreign minister criticized the institutionalized repression of Uyghurs at the UNHRC. In January 2022, the French Parliament passed a resolution denouncing China's actions as a genocide against the Uyghur Muslim population. In March 2021, Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin expressed her disapproval of the human rights conditions in Xinjiang through a tweet. The Lithuanian Parliament passed a resolution in May 2021 acknowledging that the Chinese government's treatment of the Uyghur population amounts to genocide. The Netherlands Parliament passed a non-binding resolution on February 25, 2021, declaring the Chinese government's actions against the Uyghurs as a genocide. Ukraine initially supported a statement calling for independent observers to access Xinjiang, but later withdrew its signature. Lawmakers claimed that China pressured them by threatening trade restrictions and blocking a shipment of COVID-19 vaccines. On the 22nd of April 2021, the UK House of Commons passed a non-binding parliamentary motion declaring China's human rights abuses in Xinjiang as a genocide. This comes after previous efforts by MPs and peers to accuse China of ethnic cleansing and ban UK trade with countries engaged in genocides. The motion was passed unanimously, indicating widespread concern over China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims. China responded by imposing sanctions on 9 UK citizens for spreading lies and disinformation about human rights abuses in Xinjiang. In September 2019, the Australian Foreign Minister expressed concerns about the mass detentions of Uyghurs and other Muslim groups in Xinjiang, China. Australia has consistently called for China to stop the arbitrary detention of these groups and has raised these concerns both bilaterally and in international meetings. However, in March 2021, the Australian government blocked a motion to recognize China's treatment of the Uyghurs as a genocide. In 2018, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern expressed concerns about Xinjiang during her visit to China and at the UN. She also privately discussed the matter with Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2019. However, New Zealand has faced accusations of avoiding the issue for economic reasons, given its significant exports to China. On May 5, 2021, the New Zealand Parliament passed a motion recognizing severe human rights abuses against the Uyghur people in Xinjiang, although the term genocide was not explicitly included in the motion. President Ghulam Osman Yagma of the East Turkestan government in exile has called on the international community to recognize China's treatment of Uyghurs as a genocide. The Uyghur American Association, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, Genocide Watch, and various activist groups have also expressed concerns about the situation in Xinjiang, with some labeling it as crimes against humanity or genocide. Reports from the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy and Human Rights Watch have provided evidence of state responsibility and recommended actions to address the issue. The Uyghur Tribunal, a UK-based people's tribunal, has concluded that China has committed genocide against the Uyghur population through birth control and sterilization measures. The tribunal also found evidence of crimes against humanity, torture, and sexual abuse. However, the tribunal's final determination does not legally require any government to take action. The hearings began in June 2021 and were chaired by Jeffrey Nice, the lead prosecutor in the trial of Slobodan Milosevic. The proposed Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act in 2020, which aimed to impose sanctions on those engaging in forced labor in Xinjiang, faced opposition from the American Apparel and Footwear Association and major companies like Apple, Nike, and Coca-Cola. They argued that import bans on Xinjiang cotton would disrupt supply chains. In Japan, 12 companies decided to cease business deals with Chinese firms involved in forced labor. Nike and Adidas criticized human rights abuses in Xinjiang and saw a decline in sales in China. A report in December 2022 called for automakers to cut ties with Xinjiang due to forced labor. Various Jewish leaders and organizations have spoken out against the persecution of Uyghur Muslims in China, drawing parallels to the Holocaust. Marie van der Zyl, president of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mervis have condemned the atrocities and called for international action. Jewish faith leaders from the UK, US, and California have also expressed their concerns and urged accountability. Jewish organizations such as the Union for Reform Judaism and the Jewish Council for Public Affairs have taken policy positions and called for an end to the genocide. Protests against the treatment of Uyghurs in China have occurred at Chinese diplomatic sites in different locations, such as Almaty, Los Angeles, Istanbul, and London. These protests involve Uyghur activists and individuals representing Tibet, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. The protests aim to bring attention to the alleged detention and mistreatment of Uyghurs in China. Some protests have been organized by NGOs and have gained international attention, with notable figures like basketball player Ianese Cantor participating. Several countries, including Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, India, Kosovo, Lithuania, Taiwan, the United Kingdom, and the United States, have announced diplomatic boycotts of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. The boycotts come in response to concerns over China's human rights abuses, particularly towards the Uyghur population in Xinjiang. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, has faced calls to move the Olympics to a new location, but IOC President Thomas Bach has opposed a boycott, stating that the IOC must stay out of politics. 19 Uyghurs have filed a criminal case in Istanbul against Chinese officials, accusing them of torture, rape, crimes against humanity, and genocide. The case was filed with the help of lawyer Gülden Sönmez, who stated that Turkish law allows for universal jurisdiction in such cases. Nuri Turkel's book, No Escape: The True Story of China's Genocide of the Uyghurs, was published in 2022. It sheds light on the treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang and has been recognized by being long-listed for the 2022 Moore Prize for Human Rights Writing. The Chinese government has denied the abuses against Uyghurs and other ethnic groups, conducting propaganda campaigns on social media to further denial. They have posted videos showing residents of Xinjiang denying claims of abuse, which were found to be part of an influence campaign coordinated by the CCP's Central Propaganda Department. Chinese state media outlets and some American left-wing media outlets have also denied the mistreatment of Uyghurs. Facebook has accepted content from Chinese state media outlets that deny the mistreatment. Denialism only aids Chinese and American imperialism, according to experts. Neville Roy Singham funds nonprofits and groups that deny the Uyghur genocide. In conclusion, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, China, face ongoing challenges in preserving their cultural and linguistic identity while seeking greater autonomy within the predominantly Han Chinese government.
Thank you for watching this AGNDD Intellireport. Like, subscribe, and click the bell button to get notified during new uploads. And make sure to tune in next time. Stay safe and healthy. Cheers.